going to structure this, this meeting today. Dave Miller is going to first talk with us about impact investment, which is getting capital into the land and getting young farmers onto the land. So we're going to talk about that. Then Jesse McDougall is going to talk about his farming project in Shaftesbury and how he's improving the soil. I'm proud to say I'm part of that project too. We share the flock of sheep that's working hard to make the soil better in Shaftesbury at the Studio Hill Farm. And then Dee Dee Purshouse and Peter Donovan are going to give us an overview about how we get carbon out of the atmosphere into the soil, how we're going to save it in the soil, and how all of us are going to help mitigate climate change that way. So we've got a big job ahead of us, and everybody here is going to be on board by the time we leave this meeting then. So a little bit about me and how I got here. Oh, well, I need to thank everybody, and the other person I need to thank is my true love and life partner, Dale Gulbranson, who he and I worked together on all of this stuff, and it was his good idea that we put on a party here with Oliver and Bonnie in this barn. So, so thank you, Dale. I woke up on New Year's Day this year, and it was the first day of 2015, and I thought, what am I going to do for my grandchildren in 2015? And I decided that I knew it was the UN Year of the Soil, and I decided that I was going to promote soil regeneration for climate change for my grandchildren. And the amazing thing for me is that just having that intention has brought me a really long way toward understanding, and I've discovered a lot of people who are out there doing the same thing, like Dee Dee and Peter, and Bill Mumma, who is here from Tufts University. I saw a video that he made in November that was so inspiring that it just helped me make this decision that we can turn climate change around. And one of the things that's really been missing is the capital to support the farmers who are going to be able to break this closed loop of corn, soybeans, CAFOs, that's confined animal operations, and get to organic, get to soil regeneration, and that's what we're going to really do about that, and Dee Dee and Peter will talk some about that. So I want to introduce Dave Miller, who is our CEO at Iroquois Valley Farms. Dale and I are the Northeast representatives for Iroquois Valley Farms, and it is a farmland impact investment company, and Dave is going to tell us all about it. Thank you, Dave.
So I'm Dave Miller. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Iroquois Valley Farms, and I'd like to thank Sally and Dale for putting this whole thing together and having the vision. I love the vision for your grandchildren. I think we all share that vision. So also like to thank Earth Sky Time Farm for this beautiful venue. It's always nice to see a new barn go up, and we've invested in a few barns through the company as well. And when we picked this logo, well, I think probably a number of you recognize the name Iroquois. You know, it's a Native American name. We picked that name because we started in Iroquois County. So it wasn't originally because we wanted to tie into the impact, you know, the original organic farmers, or the treating the earth with respect, you know, and all of the types of associations that you would get from that name. And I could go on and on to that, you know, social governance. Actually, the Iroquois were matriarchal, and we just added Sally to our board. So I think, you know, we're moving in very responsible directions here with the governance for the company, and that's so important, and it's probably one of my most important jobs, is to help to build a stronger board, you know, that can really carry forward what we've started throughout the generations. So that's something we work very hard about. The co-founder of our company is a medical doctor. Yeah, no, I found it. So when we thought about how we wanted to, can you hear me okay if I stand at this distance? Is this okay? The co-founder of our company is a medical doctor. He's my old college roommate. We were roommates at Loyola University in Chicago, you know, good Jesuit institution, and so we're very excited about the Pope coming and talking about environmental values and social justice, et cetera. It's, you know, it's what we were grilled in. But we decided to pick a company. The structure that we wanted to have would be an entity that could hold the land indefinitely and for generations. So we didn't want to be a fund, we didn't want to be an angel investment group, or we didn't want to be a broker or even a limited partnership that had an outside general partner somewhere in some foreign place. We wanted to be a company with our own staff, with our own board, and really set it up right. Because the thing that we always had, both my parents grew up on farms, and you know, I was a black sheep that went off into banking, but you know, now that I've come back to respectability, I wanted to make sure that we set it up right. So that's why we picked a corporate structure, and that's what we've been growing. So we'll talk more about that. I mean, we manage this as a corporation too. So I used to manage leasing companies, I still do. This one's a lot more fun and it's a lot more real. So we say we build a business to support the business of the farmers, and this is critical because we're really not looking for specific land to purchase. You know, we're looking for farmers that want to grow healthy foods on healthy soils and want to earn a good living. So it's really all about them and their business, and that's, you know, that's what we support. We have to be adaptive, we have to be reactive. These farmers have lots of needs, changing needs. So we typically have to kick in more capital for a variety of different reasons, and we never know what's going to come at us. And sometimes we have to do this quickly, or maybe they bring us another piece of land that they're interested in buying, and this means the world to them. So we have to act quickly, and we're set up to do that. And they're running their own business, by the way. We're not telling them what they should grow. We do require that it be organic and that they use organic practices. And in 9 years, we have not wavered from that. So now we're really stuck, right? You know, we can't make too many exceptions, and that's okay. You know, I think the world has come a little bit more toward what we would hope that it would happen, and so that's not a bad thing. So I used to call this my Psychology 101, Farmer Psychology 101 slide, because we had to form the company around what the farmer wanted. And when you ask a young farmer, the first question you get from a young farmer is, will I be able to buy this land someday? Will I be able to own it? So, you know, we had to set up a company that can not only hold it indefinitely, but also could give them the option to buy it. And that's what we've done. So, you know, it's not that you hear, well, I'm going to farm for 10 years and then I'm going to move to Florida, I'm going to be a rocket scientist, and then I'm going to do this or that. No, it's, I'm going to farm for the rest of my life. So that is how we approached setting up the company. So, you know, our favorite holding period is forever. And I'll go deeper how we can do that, because that sounds like a dream, right? But we can do it, I'll tell you right now, by diversifying everything we can, and especially the equity. And the Wall Street commitment, I like to knock Wall Street here a little bit. You know, that's the trading market, that's just paper assets, you know. Where we're, you know, in some ways, what we did was so easy. We just had to do the opposite of everything that had already been done. So if we did that, then, you know, that was probably something very sustainable. I'm joking there a little bit. But really, I mean, Wall Street offered, you know, what we call the Wall Street lease is a 10-year lease. And isn't that so wonderful? They give you an option to buy two. And the question is, and what happens if the farmer can't buy that land after 10 years? And then the typical answer you get from anybody out there that's doing that type of leasing is they say, well, hopefully. So we call that the well, hopefully lease. And so we set up a company that didn't have to say those two words. So we'll continue to lease that land, or the farmer has the option to buy it. Whatever is best for them and their business, that's what we want them to do. And I'll tell you how we reinforce that as we go. So we've already sold to farmers. We've been in business now for 9 years. And when we've just taken one here that I can think of, we sold land. We parceled out the land that he could afford to purchase. It wasn't the whole parcel. It was actually, he could get a $500,000 loan from the FSA, USDA program. So that's what we parceled out for him to buy. And then we matched that money. We took his money, we matched it with another $500,000 of our own money, and we went out and bought more farmland and leased it to that same farmer. And then we did a 1031 exchange, so we didn't stick the investors with the capital gain that really they probably wouldn't have been very happy to have in that year. So this is what we can do as a company. We can be a lot more flexible and adaptable and really help, at the end of the day, help those farmers grow their business. So the first two farmers we started with were not young. They were more, well, they weren't my age, but they were more, let's say, 40s and 50s. And we didn't know when we started that so many young farmers would be coming to us. That was, we learned that along the way. So this year we've purchased 4 farms so far, and every one is for a millennial farmer. And we have one under contract now, and that's for another millennial farmer. So we truly are the next generation. We're a next generation investment. This is going to be the millennial world here, and we're seeing it in the farmers that are coming to us. One of our organic farmers had a field day in June, and it was raining cats and dogs, which was a good thing because then more farmers came. You know how this works. But so it was a great turnout, and what we saw, and this is in the belly of the beast. This is in central Illinois, conventional agriculture, and what we saw was the older farmers bringing their sons and daughters to this field day to learn about organic specialty grains. And see, they're not going to change, and I think most people know that. So, but older farmers do pass away, and that's when the change happens. And so what we're seeing there is this whole next generation coming to us now, looking forward to making some money, and not just taking an insurance payment every other year, and really doing something valuable and healthy. So that's exciting to see, and it's growing quickly. So lo and behold, we have a Young Farmers Land Access Program. We gave it that name after we saw what was happening. And so now we have to really help them more and more. So we're trying to collaborate more and more with nonprofits and foundations to develop what we call a benefits package. It sort of comes along. We're providing the land access and the land security. But frankly, that's not enough. It's not going to be enough. So we need to do more than that. And Dale and Sally and I have been talking about how we might do that here. But it's really going to take, I don't know if I want to say it takes a village, but it's really going to take a lot of support to increase the probabilities of success. And frankly, I think everybody's willing to do that. So that's not rocket science to put that together. But we want to offer more than just land security. We want the organic young farmers to have help with organic seed, or have help with fertility, or who knows, maybe get a bonus, when they hit organic certification. So it gives them some incentives and some reimbursements, and put this all together and really work, probably on a state-by-state basis to do that. So that, in Vermont, that what the farmers here are going to be getting out of this package. And, I think everybody will be excited about that. We're still going to be a regional company. I'll talk more about that. So we're not going to set up a special company just to be in Vermont, or a special company just to be in Maine, because there's a lot of legal securities reasons why we just can't do that. But we can provide local impact with local entities in particular states. So here's our first two farmers, and it's really on their backs that we started building the company. And Harold Wilkin is holding some black beans there, and that's just an example of what starts to happen when farmers start to farm organically. Now this is grain country here where I'm talking about, Iroquois County, Illinois. But what happens, and we've seen this now, is that once you go organic, of course, you're starting with organic crop rotation. It's already 50% more diverse than what you were doing before, because what you were doing before was probably corn and soybeans. So now you've got a small grain, might be wheat, could be oats. Now we're seeing buckwheat, we're seeing spelt. Specialty grains, as you know, are booming. The bakers and the brewers and the millers out there in the world are demanding more and more. And so Harold started growing black beans, in addition to his other crops. And Scott Friedman on the right here, next year he'll have been with us for 10 years. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to actually come out and make have a lifetime commitment award that you earn after 10 years. We're a company that you earn your rights. you don't just get them on day one. You have to earn them. So, and the investors do too. And I'll get into that as we go. I think I talked about young farmers already. So there's just this happens to be, these farmers are all in Indiana. Actually, I just saw Indiana was in I don't know, the last 5 years, the second biggest state with regard to new organic farms. And number one was Maine. Now, I don't know if this is a surprise at all, frankly, if you sort of see what's going on, but I can tell you in the Midwest, the crack is open. So you're going to expect to see a lot more organic farms coming out of some states in the Midwest. I would expect that to continue. Iowa was third or fourth. And there's just outrageous opportunity there. If you look out over 30 years, what's going to happen is really going to change. And this is good news. So that's my prediction. And then Pennsylvania was in the top 4 too. So the farmers down below are dairy farmers. So actually they're near Goshen, Indiana. It's actually a Mennonite farm family. And the whole area is very diverse. You wouldn't think you're in the Midwest if you drive through that area. It's one of the most diverse agricultural areas of the country. And we're expanding in that area. The Fords, they do a lot of hay. And most of that hay they're farming is going to organic dairies. So there's expansion everywhere you look, whether it's specialty grains, or organic milk, or more diverse livestock. There's a shortage of organic grains to feed livestock. So I stay awake at night because I don't know how we're going to raise enough money to keep up with these young farmers. But that's a good challenge they have. Now our board is a little bit older than our farmers, so we have millennial farmers, but then we have more of a baby boomer board, I guess. I think this is hard to see. Dr. Rivard is on the left. He's the co-founder of the company. And I have a little more hair than he does. I like to tell him that. We have a 9-member board. On the far right, I'm way over on the right. I know I'm standing in front of some of you here. I'm sorry. Andy Loving is a financial advisor. He's with an entity called Natural Investments. Karen Chamberlain is back here from Clean Yield Asset. I think that, I don't know, is Peter Field here? No? So financial advisors, socially responsible financial advisors is a growing world. So, just in time, as more and more investors are looking to invest responsibly, we have financial advisors like Karen and like Andy here that are really helping people put together portfolios that are focused to much more sustainable and responsible impacts. So that's excellent news for everybody as well. We have 2 farmers on our board. There, one young farmer with his family sitting on the left. Just the brightest young farmer you're ever going to meet. When he speaks up at our board meetings, everybody listens. And we usually do what he suggests. And then Harold Wilkin, our first farm tenant, is down on the bottom on the right in front of the John Deere tractor. And Sally is sort of, jack of all trades, farmer, farm owner, farm visionary. So, I think we can count her almost in the so that gives us 3 farmers out of 9. So we are so excited to have more farmers on our board. And I think we're just going to continue to grow that. Maybe we might find up with the majority. But, that's part of my job to move in that direction. We don't really focus on, we don't go look for the land. The farmers bring the land opportunities to us. So we're reactive to their business and their business needs. I think when we first started, I had seeded a couple different companies that didn't know for sure which way was going to be the best way that was going to work out. Turned out Iroquois Valley Farms was the best one and had the best structure. But in the early days, we did make the mistake of buying some land and then trying to find a farmer to fit on it, and that's really hard to do. So we don't make that mistake too often. So we're really reactive. So the farm family that is standing in the with the dairy background there, the family on the right, the McMonagle family, they were referred to us by Organic Valley. So it's sometimes producers refer us farmers, but then those farmers are looking to, in this case, this was a Generation X or I think family that was looking to change careers sort of midlife. So a little unusual, not our typical situation, but very committed. And we had to buy out, that's in West Virginia, we had to buy out a coal lease to get that land. Because we won't buy unless we have the mineral rights. We just won't run the risk of somebody fracking or mining. We just won't do it. So we walk away from the deal if we can't get the mineral rights. So in this case, our chief operating officer worked very hard to secure a buyout of that lease, and they were just, excited. So, and we're in New York. This is also a dairy farm. We have 2 farms in New York now. They're both dairy operations. Dairy is still newer to us. We started moving into dairy 2 years ago. I think it's just going to continue to grow and be a good part of our business. We applied last year to put a conservation or agricultural easement. In fact, who's here from ASA? No, didn't show up? Okay. Well, Sally and Dale worked very hard on that.
We're still working on it.
Still working on it. Okay. So, most of the farms we buy don't have a lot of development premium built into the purchase price, but those that do, will work to try to put an easement in place. So, I think it's something you just keep at it. This is actually a poster, but I put it in here because last year we attended it was only about a year ago that I think a lot of the climate change, the connection between soils and climate change started to get made. Now that, actually, I'm going to caveat that because there's a couple speakers coming behind me. They're going to say, Dave, you really helped the lunch on that. It started happening a long time ago. I can say, like, out there in the public, I don't think there was great awareness. And now we're seeing so much more awareness of the importance of living soils and the positive impact that they can have on our climate. So that's exciting to see. And of course we promote that. And I use the word endow a more healthier planet because one of our goals is to get an endowment, college endowment fund to invest in us this year. So you'll hear me using that word a lot. But there's really a whole array of impacts here. I don't even have pollinators on there. I don't want to forget the bees and the butterflies, but we have investors now coming to us that for all kinds of different reasons, including the favorable impacts that we have on the monarch butterfly. So that's exciting to see. So that's why I say there's no reason for us to change either economically or environmentally or socially. There's no reason for us to change how we set up this company. So, as we build a more visionary board, we'll just continue to cement that impact in. All right, this is sort of a historic, I'm going to flip through here pretty fast. We started with 10 investors. The first 100, after the first 100 investors, we gave up an exit. So what's the note here is that we had to prove that we could be trusted. We knew we had to prove to farmers that they could trust us. And one of the important ways we did that was not to provide an exit to the investors. So the first 100 bought into the company's stock, bought into the company without any structured exit whatsoever. We just said, don't worry about it. You know what we're doing. You can go see, the land and see what the farmer's doing, and we're going to build in an exit, but you'll just have to trust that we're going to do it. Because if we don't prove to the farmers that we have committed capital, then it all falls apart. So, well, we're told, well, that's Dave, you're crazy. You're not going to get anybody to invest like that. And I said, well, people invest in a lot of stupid things, don't they? There's a lot of paper asset investments out there. You don't even know what you bought. At least with us, you can go see it, and you can go talk to your farmer. So lo and behold, we got our 100 investors under that platform. And then when we did, then we came out and said, okay, well, we're going to have an exit program now. And it's a 7-year vesting. So after 7 years, investors can start to sell their stock back to the company. Right now, you can sell back $100,000 a year. And we have lines of credit now to back up our redemptions. And we also set aside farmland just in case. So we're building, bigger and better redemption programs, and everybody thinks I got soft now. But of course, we have to renew capital to keep this going, and so that's what we're doing. So now we have over 200 investors, and it's just growing. We have investors in 28 states. We don't have to be in 28 states, but because we work with a lot of financial advisors, Karen, how many states are your investors in? More than one, right?
Yeah, at least concentrated in Vermont, but at least a dozen.
Yeah, a dozen states. So that's why we're in states that we don't even travel to. Is because of the financial advisors, and it's a good fit, by the way, because typically we're working with fee-only financial advisors. So when that means that they're earning a fee every year, for growing your portfolio and making sure it's what responsible and has the impacts that you want to have. So they're earning it year by year by year by year. Just like our farmers are creating, a more healthy soil year by year by year by year. So that we like that relationship with fee-only financial advisors. We like it so much that we say, well, I don't have to worry about raising the capital. The financial advisors are going to raise it off for us. So that's only partly true. But the flip of that is that the investment bankers that bring us capital and want to charge an upfront fee, we just say no thank you. It doesn't fit what we're building. We're not looking for hot money. We're not looking for trading capital. We'd rather that you earn that placement year by year by year, just like our fee-only financial advisors. So we've never taken capital on a brokerage or a sort of investment banker upfront fee basis. And this chart just says we're diversified. We started the company with rollover IRAs. So that pie chart over there, a third of our capital is IRA money. A third of our capital is just private investor capital, taxable accounts. And another third is foundations, family offices, faith-based lending. The Sisters of Loretto in Kentucky were our first faith-based. There's a little funny story there. I have to digress for just a second. But I was on the way to visit the good Sisters of Loretto, who had been here for 200 years, right? So we should have a Sister of Loretto on our board. And on the way there, Dr. Steve called me, as I call him, and I said, yeah, we're going to go see the Sisters of Loretto today. And he said, really? I think those were the nuns that taught me in grade school. I said, wow. And I said, I think I'm running late. And then I started to get really nervous because I was taught by nuns in grade school too. And just the thought of being late for a meeting with a group of nuns just sent chills down my back. So anyway, we have other faith-based investors. It's a good market for us, and of course the Pope and his encyclical doesn't hurt that business. So we're going to see more of that, and we love it. Now we're talking to sisters everywhere. On the bottom right, our share price has done well over these first 9 years. I can't tell you where it's going. You know, as an investor, you take the risk of land prices can go up or down. We don't control that. We can tell you, though, that we believe that our farmers are making that land more productive and producing more income on it year by year by year. So we expect to be starting a dividend soon and then growing that dividend. Because we share in some of their upside revenues and some of their upside profits. That's how we do the leasing. So the company gets a share of the upside. The farmer is getting land security and the option to buy the land. So it's a relationship that has a balance to it, and it's working. And the share price gets reset every year. So appraisers come in, they value all the assets. They don't put much of a premium on organic land. So frankly, that type of valuation is really yet to be seen in any significant way. We put a small premium on the land when the stock price gets revalued, 2 to 3% typically. I think it's pretty conservative. But we have to stabilize an income flow. So we really manage this as a company. We stabilize an income flow. We start paying out dividends. Someday one of these appraisers is going to say, oh, maybe I should use the income approach to value you guys instead of just the comparables with conventional farms. Maybe you don't fit in that category. So we think that's a value proposition. That's one of the reasons to not wait too long to make an investment. We diversify our debt. So we do issue private debt to individuals, or actually financial advisors have been a good provider for us for our notes. We call them Young Farmer Land Access Notes, because that's in fact what we do with the money. It's a very creative name for those notes. And we expect to be continuing to issue those for a long time. We manage our debt. We're not highly leveraged. We're conservative people. My management team is a bunch of boring auditors and accountants and financial types, and typically afraid of everything. So we have to push them to borrow a little money. We have the map of the country there shows that those are the states where we have investors. If anybody here is from West Virginia, there's a hole in the map to the right there. We're trying to fill that in. So, or if you know somebody from West Virginia that might be an investor, let us know. We want to color that in green. I'll be happy to email this to anybody here that's interested. Just sign on the yellow page over there and give us your email address. We're growing organically, as we say. We have I think we're about 3,500 acres now. And that's mostly productive farmland. We diversify our assets. Like I said, we diversify everything. We have to. Farming is risky. We're a leasing company. That's risky business too. So we diversify by farmer, by product, by what they're growing, by location.
No Vermont investments.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet. We got our fingers crossed. We know with Sally and Dale working with us that's just a matter of time.
One of the differences, I should say, is that in Vermont we have our prices are much more comparable with other kinds of land. I mean, farmland in the Midwest is farmland, whereas here it's building land and other kinds of things. And we're working with the Vermont Land Trust to see if we can have a deal where we can conserve and buy the farmland and make it affordable for the farmers. And I can talk a little bit more about that when we're in the conversation. But yeah, we would like to invest in Vermont, definitely.
So we need a tenant. So we once again, we just don't go out and buy land and then try to find a tenant for it. So most of our farmers are growing their business. Most of them have an existing business and they want more land. So I think that's just a matter of time. Once again, I'm not going to go into I will point out the variable rent because as our leases give us an upside, our older farms are now kicking off what we would call a bonus rent. So they've stabilized, they're actually doing quite well. The returns on our older farms are more like 6%, where typically we start off with something around a 3% return. So as the farmers are building their business, we start to profit, and they obviously are profiting too. So as we increase rents, then that means it's highly likely that the board will approve a dividend. And then as we grow income, we'll pay higher dividends. So we do expect to be paying dividends as we go out there. And you can see we expect to hit $1 million in revenues. We are profitable, so for the first 6 months of this year, we did turn a profit. And we expect to still stay in profitability now. The hard years were the beginning years.
Can you comment on the farmer level income for the farm, as well as how that farm, what the income of that farmer is relative to farmers in the area?
Most of our farmers, come to us already owning some land. Usually not leasing it. We're an organic farmland leasing company, so that's what we do. I have to talk either grain farmers or dairy farmers because that's where most of our business is. So the grain farmers are usually third or fourth generation. So they're sharing equipment with their parents or grandparents. They're getting support from them, and they're probably farming. Often we'll buy, if we buy one parcel, we'll buy two, and sometimes we'll buy three, because we want to get them into a position where they can be diversified, and they can have a crop rotation. So the grain farmers are going to be doing organic soy, they'll be doing organic corn, although it might be white or blue corn, and they'll have the specialty grain in there, and they'll be doing hay. And so in terms of income, some of them they might even be into six-figure income. So they can definitely get to that level, especially if we're getting them up to 500 acres. But we'll start with one parcel. On the dairy farmers, we've only started doing dairy for about 2 years now. We haven't done a repeat purchase for a dairy farmer yet, so the sizes of the dairy farms in New York that we have are something like 150 acres and 180 acres for Taconic Ridge, I think.
We bought 160 acres for Taconic Ridge, and he already was farming about 300.
Okay.
He added on to his dairy farm.
Yeah. So we don't have enough dairy to where I can say I think 500 acres would be like an average, and the income.
But in general, when they add on 160 acres, they're able to pay the lease payments and still make a profit on that land relative to their other land profits.
We only buy it as an economic lease. Now, that otherwise we don't purchase. So like we just don't. We're signing a pre-lease commitment with that farmer before we purchase that land. So that has to be economic for both sides. We drive down the base rent as low as we can get it. So most of these farmers are paying the equivalent of a 3.5% return. The lease rate is set at a 3.5% return to the company. And now we issue notes, that are up to 3.5% plus or minus. So we would only be breaking even if we only funded ourselves with debt. We can't do much better than that. We really, that's one reason why we have to have a lot of equity in the company. And, as an equity holder, you are taking risks, but that's why we diversify. So the return, we do cap the returns for the dairy farmers. So we'll cap the return at anywhere from 6 to 8%. And that's, we're just learning that, but we will put a cap on that because it's not fair. We're not going to take an unlimited upside here on a dairy farm operation. It's just too much work, and the dairy farmers, we don't need to have that. If we can stabilize a 6% return, we'd be happy. So that's where we're going. I think that's where we're going as a company. And that would allow us to pay a nice dividend. and then you still have capital appreciation in the land.
But we build a business plan with the farmer. That's really a big part of how we do business with farmers, so that farmers are going to be happy with what the terms are before we ever go into the purchase of the farm.
So we've had one failure in terms of a tenancy. That was in Maine. We're learning a lot from that failure. That was a farmer that was selling to Stonyfield Farms, and they came to us through Stonyfield. And despite our best efforts between Stonyfield and ourselves, there was, that farmer got into too big of a hole and just couldn't get out of it. And when somebody pulled the cows away, that was the end of that one. That's a simplified version of what happened. It's much more complicated than that, but we're aware that we really need to help these farmers, as I was talking about earlier, more than just providing land access. We have to do more than that, and I think we can. So lastly, we're recognized for our impacts. We're certified B Corporation, which means we're a benefit corporation. Our Young Farmer Land Access program, I think, leads the country in terms of actually acres to young farmers that they have the option to buy. And Impact Assets, which is a collaboration between the Rockefeller Foundation and the Calvert Foundation, actually ranks and rates impact investments these days, so we're now a rated entity. So anyway, thank you for coming and listening to our story, and we're happy to follow up, if anybody is interested in investing or just learning more about Iroquois Valley Farms. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're going to hear from Jesse McDougall, who's going to talk to us about his farm and improving the soil.
Hi. I just want to thank Sally and thank Oliver and everybody for putting this together, and Dave, the great work you're doing. It's sorely needed. Young farmers need access to the land. In 1936, my wife's great-grandparents left New York City just at the tail end of the Depression, looking for more food security for themselves and their family in future generations. And the story goes that great-grandfather wanted a stream and great-grandmother wanted a view, and they searched the Green Mountains, and this is the view that they found. These are the fields that we're working today. This is down in Shaftesbury. We're just down the road here. This is looking north up at Equinox, which is right south of us now. The farm that we're on was a dairy from 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And then in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and until last week, it's been a horse and hay farm. These have been hay fields for going back 200 years, as far as we can tell. The house that we're in now, with the third generation of the family on the land, was put up in 1800, and the barns were there long before. The fifth generation is running around outside somewhere, and it is humbling to step into that span of history, and that is the framework through which we make all our decisions now at the farm. The woman who ran the farm before us was my wife's aunt. She ran it for 40 years, and she made it all look very easy. She had it down pat, and we have learned in the last few years that she actually did just make it look easy, and it's incredibly difficult. She ran the horse business and the hay operation, and she managed the hay fields. We have 50 acres of hay fields. The property itself is 250 acres. She managed the hay fields conventionally, like many of the fields in the area. By conventionally, I mean a lot of the farmers in the area do a hay and corn rotation. So hay fields as a perennial stand of grass, because you need specific grasses in there, particularly for horses, are invaded by native grasses, invasive species, that sort of thing. So every 5 years they would till the land spray Roundup on everything, plant corn, and for the next 3 years they would use pesticides and herbicides to keep the land solely in corn. After 3 years, they'd clean that out, replant it to a clean, quote-unquote, stand of grass for the hay. So this has been going on for 40 years. And in 2012, Edie, the woman who ran the farm, passed away of brain cancer. Devastating for the whole family, obviously. And that's when my wife and I stepped in to help where we could, try to carry things forward. And first decision we made was to stop spraying everything on the farm. Not being farmers, my wife and I come out of the IT world. We knew what we didn't want. We knew what scared us. We didn't know what replaced that. So we didn't do anything. We let the grass be grass and said, you know, let's let it just sit for a while we figured stuff out. We knew we had to put something back. If you're taking tonnage, you know, tons and tons of hay off the fields, we knew we had to put something back. We didn't know quite what. Luckily, we were going into the winter at that point, and that's when we began. Here's the hay field. I mean, the corn. We didn't know quite what to do, so we hit the books. We hit YouTube. We called all our farmer friends. We called the local experts. Nobody could give us a straight answer or a satisfying answer on how to manage hay fields organically. They could tell us, you know, how to manage your garden, how to manage a row crop, but when it came to perennial grasses, nobody could give us a satisfying answer on how to manage 50 acres organically. They said, you know, spread manure, and we did, and a lot of it. But that was very time and fuel intensive and didn't give us the result that we wanted. But over that winter, we came across the work of, you know, the pioneers in regenerative agriculture, Joel Salatin, Alan Savory, Alan Nation, and so on. And it was Alan Savory's TED Talk, which if you haven't seen, you should see. That was our aha moment. That was when we said, we're looking at this the wrong way. We're not here to grow grass. We're here to grow soil. The fields that we were looking at and living 10 feet from were exhibiting the problems that Alan Savory was talking about in that TED Talk. They were dry, dusty, moss was growing in between patches of grass, the yield was down, lakes were forming because the water was not getting into the earth. And we thought that was just so peculiar in Vermont, you know, one of the most lush green states in the nation, that our fields would be desertifying. And that's when we came to the idea of animals, putting animals back on the land. And we were cautious people, so we went round and around and around and around about what to put on the land. And finally we came to chickens. They were small, they were easy to control, they were you know, lightweight infrastructure-wise. And we said, let's just start with 50 chickens in one mobile coop. Worst case scenario, we have 50 chickens in the freezer at the end of the experiment, and you know, we'll move on. Nothing too terrible. So that's what we did. These are the little birds. We got some turkeys in there too. This was last spring that we did this, but it wasn't worst case scenario. It actually came out better than we had expected. The grass 2 weeks behind the chicken tractor, which we moved twice a day, 10 feet, so 20 feet in all, came roaring back. We put it through what was the driest, thinnest, stalkiest grass on the farm with little hope. We thought we hoped to see something, but what we saw just blew us away. It was tall, lush, green, abundant grass behind the chickens. And for half a day, we had 50 chickens on each patch. So the amount of time for the payoff was just, you know, it blew us away. And we sold all the chickens. So people were clamoring for them. So we We were thrilled that we were able to spare ourselves the expense of buying the chemical fertilizers. We were able to rejuvenate the soil and therefore the grass that was growing on it, and add a new revenue stream to the farm. So we said, done. Double down, we'll do 50 chickens again. We did 50 chickens again, same result. So we were able to do, in that year, because it was a limited experiment, I think it was 700 square feet of the fields, which, you know, doesn't look like much when you have 50 acres. You could see it on Google Maps, which thrilled me to no end. But 700 square feet. So over the winter, this last winter, my wife Callie and I knew we wanted to expand again. What do? Do we do 6,000 birds? Do we do another species of animal? And that's when we started talking about sheep. There had never been sheep on the farm that we knew of. I mean, not in our family anyway. So we started toying with the idea of getting a lamb, 2 lambs to precede the chickens and turkeys in the rotation. They would, get the grass ready for the chickens and turkeys to come through to do their thing. And they'd spread out all the lamb manure. That was the idea. Then one day, about a week later, Sally knocks on our door. And for anybody who knows Sally, you won't be surprised to learn that a week later we had 60 sheep on the farm. So, here they are. You can't really see them, but we also have a guard donkey named Ben on the farm now. This is a photo of them this year in the East Meadow. So this spring we said, let's put everybody in 10 acres on the East Meadow. Everybody, speaking like a farmer now. Put all the critters in the East Meadow, which was, it's up on a ridge, it's high, it's in the sun, it's in the wind, it dries out like that. And it was sorely in need of some rejuvenation. The hay bale numbers had just dropped precipitously since we stopped putting anything back, which we expected, but it was, we had to start buying hay. And for a hay farm, that's pretty embarrassing, especially when you're the new kid in town. And, but the addition of the sheep, because they cover so much more area, expanded the amount of field we could cover from 700 square feet to 20 acres. So we've now moved the chickens and turkeys and sheep through 20 acres on the farm. And you can see it here. This is the East Meadow. We affectionately call that the stripe. This was taken in the spring, probably in late May, I guess. But you can see east of the stripe, west of the stripe is what the field looked like. It was dry, thin, patchy, yellowed. This center stripe was the worst patch in the field. And now, I'll step out of the way here so everybody can see. It did that, and we were just rolling around in it with joy. Broad-leaved, tall, green grass, and what we didn't expect is it started choking out the invasive species. So as the grass and sod strengthened up, the bed straw couldn't get the light it needed because the grass was towering over it, and everything we wanted to happen was coming up. So here we have a year-over-year comparison of what the same patch of ground looked like. 2013, just coming out of corn. You can see some moss in that photo. No grass to speak of. Nothing certainly available. 2014, after the chickens have been across it, you can see a lot of the growth trampled, a lot of new sprouts coming up, and in 2015, the lush green grass we have in that spot now. And that's without spreading a bag of seed or any fertilizer or spending any money on wrapping it up. So our vision going forward is we want to build a regenerative model that builds wealth in the soil, and using the materials or the raw materials of sunlight and the carbon from the atmosphere. Drinking, this grass did in the right-hand photo. All the hay across the whole Northeast is struggling to get to 2 growths this year. This field has done this 4 times now this year. So we have quadrupled, is my guesstimate, the amount of biomass we're growing here. And every time that field shoots back up, it is sucking the carbon out of the atmosphere, which is what Dee Dee and Peter will talk about. So I have an article over here that I've written if you'd like to take a look at this in detail. And I invite you all to come down and see what we're doing at the farm. Thank you very much.
So Dee Dee and Peter, you can tell us about soil carbon sequestration.
Yeah, this is Dee Dee Pershouse here, and I'm Peter Donovan, and we're with the Soil Carbon Coalition, which is a nonprofit. And the purpose is to engage people in the opportunity and facilitate public understanding of the opportunity of building soil carbon, soil organic matter, and the resulting benefits to water and perhaps climate.
So,
Sure.
2 of the projects that we have three projects we have underway. One is that we're monitoring close to 300 innovative farms and ranches around North America, so the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And Peter's working on a mapping database that he'll talk more about, and I'm working on bringing the kind of thing that Jesse was just talking about, that kind of information into the school systems through a learning resources development and curriculum. We just started that work last week in 2 schools in Vermont. So over the past 150 years, we've lost half of the world's topsoil, mostly due to mismanagement. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, "A nation that destroys its soils destroys itself." And why did he say that? Well, topsoil is that life-filled layer on the top of the soil that holds everything together. And it also creates the space for water to sink in and create life. So it allows us also to build structures like barns that won't wash away. And I've come to think of it, because I actually come out from a healthcare background, that soil is really like the microbiome of the land. And which in human health, we've overlooked the role that microorganisms play in our health and our development, our immunity, even our brain development is turned on by microorganisms. And in soil, similarly, it's been really overlooked, the importance of the microorganisms and the whole ecology of the soil. When we lose topsoil, we lose productivity, we lose money, we have water shortages due to loss of the water filtering capacity of the soil. We also have flooding and drought due to the loss of the water holding capacity of soils. And we have loss of biodiversity. And we also have loss of carbon to the atmosphere. So when living soils die off, the carbon from those living organisms that were in the soil escapes up to the atmosphere. And approximately 1/3 of our current emissions is due to loss of carbon from the soils, failing soils. So my goal in the next few minutes is to show you what's possible in terms of restoring carbon and water cycling in soils. So where's the carbon in this picture?
It's in the air.
Some of it is in the air, yeah. Where else is it? I don't know if it's a little bit tricky with this light to see this.
In the fence post.
There may be some in the fence posts. If you can see on the left-hand side, there's a fence down the middle, and on the left-hand side, there's a grassland of healthy grass. It looks kind of like what Jesse was just showing us. And on the right, it's really a desertified landscape with very little growing in it. So the carbon in the picture, it's in the whole left side. It's in the grass. It's in the grass roots. It's in the fungal hyphae that are underneath there connecting the grass roots. It's in the microorganisms that are in the soil. It's in the insects, the worms. And it's in the exudates, the residues of all of that life that's living there. So the plants take CO2 from the atmosphere, and in the presence of sunlight and water, They take that carbon and turn it into carbohydrates, some of which turns into sugars, about 40%, that they send out into the soil to nourish the soil life. And then they also, of course, produce oxygen for us to breathe. So there's an important piece here that when the plants create exudates, or the sugar, or cakes and cookies, as Elaine Ingham likes to talk about it, for the microorganisms in the soil, they're doing that for a few reasons. One is that the microorganisms exchange with them and help to break down minerals and nutrients for the plants. The microorganisms also clump together the little particles of sand, silt, and clay and create structure in the soil. And when there's structure in the soil, that means that air can get down through, plant roots have an easier time getting through, and most importantly, water can enter the soil. So what happens if you don't have structure in the soil? If you look on the right side, can you imagine walking on that side? What would it feel like under your feet? Kind of hard, right? So those are probably soils that have a lot of clay in them, to kind of baked into something. And on the left side, you can imagine it might be a little more spongy. So healthy topsoil is like a sponge that covers the earth. I've been teaching science classes all week, so I have a little experiment here.
Somebody to hold it? Sure.
Peter, you want to do the honors there? Unaggregated soils are just particles of sand, silt, and clay. It's weathered rocks. Okay? And when water comes down in the form of rain onto unaggregated soils, you can see what happens. So first of all, you can see there's erosion happening, right? That the soil is moving. You can also see that it's not actually soaking in. Anyone who's ever made bread knows what happens when you first put the liquid into the flour. It just sits there. So on the right-hand side, we have unaggregated soil, and that's basically what's happening there. If the rain goes, the water moves off. It creates, if it's a sloped landscape, it creates flooding. If it's not a sloped landscape, then it's going to sit there if it's cool, or it's going to evaporate really quickly if it's warm. So what happens when we add some life to the soil? And with the flour, we would be adding yeasts, which is microorganisms, and maybe some of the bacteria from the air, maybe some of those slimy exudates, like in the form of an egg. When you do that, then you suddenly have this pore space there. And if you pour water onto that, something very different happens. So it's going to soak in, and that means whether you're in a landscape that's prone to flooding or to drought, you're going to have better water management. You're also going to have filtration as it goes down through the soil and gets to the water table, that it's going to clean out any pollutants that are in there. So Jesse mentioned Allan Savory. So the first few slides here are from land that is being managed in Zimbabwe. And it's being managed similar to the way Jesse is with moving the sheep, but in this case it's with cattle. And this is land that's been bare for many, many decades. So that was 2004, the first slide. The second one is 2005, 1 year after moving cattle through, just one time through. You can see that the bare ground's starting to fill in with grass. 2006, there's no more bare ground. This is during the dry season. And what we're doing here is moving cattle in a way that is approximating the impact of a wild herd of animals. It's very different than traditional or than current ranching practices, where the cattle are allowed to spread out and either overgraze or undergraze. So this is a very particular way of moving the cattle and a very particular decision-making process based on observing the results. This is during the rainy season, the same piece of land, 2014. There's now deep-rooted perennials there that are bringing the water even further down into the ground, a lot more carbon in this landscape and a lot less in the atmosphere. So that was a dry landscape, or a landscape that's what we call more of a brittle landscape with seasonal rains and a long dry period. Peter and I were up in Saskatchewan in October remonitoring some of the first plots that he put in back in 2011. And in October, there was still a lot of water and mud on fields from flooding that had happened in June up there. Now the reason is because the water did not sink in. It was like just putting water onto the flour. And these were all grain farmers all around the farm that we were remonitoring. And they were growing wheat and canola. And their seeds were rotting in the ground. Nothing happening there. Our friend Blaine, who we were staying with and whose land we were monitoring, had been a wheat farmer about 15 years ago, and he said that he was basically buying his crop at the store because he had to spend so much on chemicals and on seeds, and that his land stank and the water just wouldn't soak in or do anything there. So he transitioned to holistic pasture management, and during the flooding, the rain just soaked right into the grass and stayed in the rivers, and his land was fine. His house was unaffected. So what happened with the carbon tests that we saw there? So Blaine was, let's see. So each hectare of his land, which is about the size of a city block, we found every year had gained an average of 6.18 metric tons of carbon, and which is equivalent of removing about 23 tons of CO2 from the atmosphere. That means that his whole 320 hectare farm, which is about a little over a square mile, was removing the equivalent of about 380 Canadian citizens' annual CO2 emissions from the atmosphere each year. He was no longer having to spend any money on inputs. He was getting lots of beautiful grass-finished beef, turkeys, clean water, flood protection, beautiful wildflowers, and fertile soil for growing vegetables and fruits as well. This is some of Blaine's friends and neighbors who are also have been practicing holistic land management, and their land was gaining almost, actually a little bit more than twice as much as Blaine's, and drawing down the equivalent of 800 people's annual CO2 emissions on each square mile of land. So just a little sense to give you what's possible. Shall I stop here, or shall we? We've got a little bit more of just sort of some principles of soil health.
Our food is ready. I think we could help ourselves, have a little bit of food, talk with each other, and then sit back down and talk about it. I think people may have specific questions.
Okay, Peter has some things to present as well, so maybe you want to do that first, or yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Why don't you present, Peter, and then we'll have the food right after that. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks, Dee Dee, and thanks, Sally. I won't be long. I'm available for questions for the next little while here. The Soil Carbon Challenge, which we've been doing, is the reason we're doing that. I want to get back to some basics here. In 2010, the University of Michigan did a study because we don't understand the carbon cycle as a society. They asked a variety of American college students, where does the dry mass of plants come from? Does it come from the air, or does it come from the soil? And most college students, most college-educated Americans responded from the soil. And that would be true of the Harvard faculty, certainly the United States Congress. I encourage you to try this. If you see a big tree with a big gnarly root system, asking economists, where does the mass of that tree come from, the dry mass of the tree come from? And I'll bet you a bottle of whiskey that he'll say it's from the soil, because that's the way we've been trained to think. That's what Aristotle believed. And we still believe that today, the majority of people. In about 1630, a Belgian alchemist named Baptiste von Helmont did a famous experiment where he took 200 pounds of oven-dry soil and put it in a container, added a 5-pound willow shoot, added nothing but rainwater for the next 5 years. At the end of 5 years, he took out now a tree, weighed 169 pounds, not counting the leaves that dropped every fall, and he passed the soil through his oven, got it oven dry again, and the soil weighed 199 pounds, 14 ounces, lost 2 ounces. The mass of that tree came from the atmosphere. That was established almost 400 years ago by conventional science, but we're still not caught up to that. And the reason we're doing this soil carbon challenge, which is fairly accurate measurement of soil carbon change, is that we don't understand this process. We don't see it, because even though the energy captured by plants from sunlight is easily 10 to a dozen times greater than all the energy that you will read about in the New York Times energy section. It's a dozen times greater. And it has literally transformed our planet in ways that we can't even begin to realize, because that's not the way our science has taught us. And so we're trying to get back to what is the real force that almost literally makes our world go round, and that is the biological capture of sunlight energy by plants. And one of the ways we measure this is by measuring soil carbon change accurately. It's a very precise and fairly detailed sampling method. But there are many other ways, and we're getting into that. Water infiltration, production of beef, corn, soybeans, whatever you're producing, per acre, per inch of rainfall, whatever the limiting factor is, per dollar of input costs. Because if that trend is going up, you're capturing more solar energy. The economy of the carbon cycle is largely separate from our money economy. And that is kind of an open question for us now when we're under the influence of climate change and tremendous water problems. As I travel the country, water is the #1 issue, too much or too little. And that is directly related, as Dee Dee says, to soil structure. And since the late 1920s, USDA has tried all sorts of conservation programs, agricultural programs, and not really moved the needle on soil health very much at all. And I've told this to USDA people, and there's a lot of nodding of heads. We don't know how to do this as a society. We spend, since about 1931, USDA conservation programs have spent about $294 billion in 2009 dollars in conservation and trying to maintain soil organic matter. And they haven't done it. It doesn't work. We don't know how to do that as a society, and that's why we're concentrating on monitoring, because we need to have a learning system for this. And I congratulate Iroquois Valley Farms. By the way, Dave, in about 2002, I wrote a paper kind of laying out this kind of idea. I didn't have the financial background to implement it, but it's the open question: how can we bring management to land? It's easy to apply techniques. We can train people to do that, to apply techniques. But to applying management, I think, is a very subtle and individualized process. And I congratulate Dave on the insight. And I would say that you have a responsive approach, not a reactive approach, but a responsive approach rather than an overall strategic approach. And I think that's a very important distinction when you're managing something as complex as biology, to have a responsive, adaptive approach, because we don't know how all this stuff works. We just don't know. It's largely a black box. There's a lot of things that work, but to learn it, we need to do monitoring. So that's what our Soil Carbon Coalition does, and we're embarking on a project called the Atlas of Biological Work, which is going to be mapping photosynthesis and water infiltration, including big data with citizen science in an open framework that's highly usable, because if we want to make big changes, we have to change how we see things. If we change how we do things, we'll make little changes, but to make big changes, we need to change how we see things. And I think Jesse pointed this out earlier this afternoon in his very, very good presentation on how management can change once you begin to see things differently. So, as I said, well, our website is soilcarboncoalition.org. We're very interested in working with local communities in figuring out how they can look at what's happening with the biological capture of sunlight energy, which is the most powerful and creative planetary force. And we need to learn how to do that on the basis of management. We don't believe necessarily in carbon sequestration. Sequestration is a Spanish word for kidnapping. Carbon is always moving through biological systems, always on the move. And we don't, it's a cycle, it's a process, it's driven by solar energy, and it's what keeps us going. It's what keeps us out of equilibrium. If we were not out of equilibrium, we'd all be dead. This whole planet is out of equilibrium, and we need it that way in order to sustain life. It's not a balanced thing. A balanced thing is a dead battery. We need a life-giving flow of energy. Earth is a closed system for matter, pretty much, but a massively open system for energy. We're riding a class 5 rapids of solar energy, and we need to learn how to manage that. Anyway.
So let's have something to eat, and then maybe we'll get back together and start the conversation with some questions and answers. And thank you to all of our presenters.
I can tell you what the food is really quickly. There are cracker bread tarts, you could call them. That's just what I thought of. But they have a bunch of different toppings. Some of them have roasted summer squash. Some of them have our veggie burger, Vici Gold burgers, which are made right here using all organic Vermont-grown produce and whole grains and nuts that we wood fire in our bakery. And then there's also roasted sweet potatoes from Laughing Child Farm in Pollitt with a walnut pate. And there's our hummus that we make with some of the breads over there. And there's our kraut from our cabbage. It's lacto-fermented kraut that's on some of the veggie burgers, and there's other ones that have roasted peppers. So just try everything. But that side has more of like those cracker bread, veggie burger type things, and that side is the sweet potatoes and hummus and bread.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Principles of soil health that Ray Archuleta of the NRCS has put together. One of the principal ones is keeping it covered year round, and preferably with plant cover, with living roots in the ground. But even if you don't have plant cover on there, keeping it covered somehow. So what's the name? Peter, is it Singing Frogs Farm? That they've done some really innovative work with no-till organic using landscape cloth at times when they don't have plant cover. And people are coming up with all kinds of interesting ways of doing that. So again, the second one, keeping living roots in the ground as long as possible, or even better than that, year round, so that you're getting more perennial root growth, bringing those sugars down deeper into the ground. Using plant diversity above ground to increase the microbial diversity below ground. So different plants have different relationships with different organisms under the ground, and the more diversity you can have on the top, the healthier your soil will be. minimizing physical, chemical, and biological stresses. So physical stress, and here's the place where we might be stepping on a few organic farmers' toes here. Physical stress, primarily we're talking about tillage. And if you think of those soil aggregates are working all year round to build the structures for soil to function properly. So, and every time we come through there with a plow, it would be as if somebody came through with a bulldozer once a year or twice a year and knocked down all the buildings we've built, all the roads we've built, everything that we've built up for our civilization, and then expected us to be functioning and healthy and happy. So when you do that, every time you till, you're basically breaking down all of the structures that the microorganisms and other things have built underground, and the soil just can't function in the same way. It can't absorb water in the same way because you're basically collapsing or breaking apart all those pore spaces.
Is there a sort of a minimum depth that you could go to? Can you somehow chop off those cover crops in order to be able to...
Yes, so for example, one of the things that people are doing is crimping or rolling, like growing winter rye and then rolling it, or walking over it, or sending cattle over it, so that it lays down on the ground and it will actually kill the crop, so that it becomes organic matter decomposing in the ground, and feeding the microorganisms and providing that cover, but it's not shading out the next year's growth. So that's one example. There are a lot of different ways of doing that. Chemical stresses, I think everybody understands, so that's more understood. And then biological stresses are more things like overgrazing or undergrazing, and that has to do with how you are moving grazing animals through the land. Integrating a diversity of animals into the land is very beneficial for soil, so it doesn't necessarily mean that you are a beef farmer or a chicken farmer, but if you can integrate animal impact in there. We visited a potato farmer named Brendan Rocky, who's using cattle at the edges of the potato fields. Because of USDA standards, he can't put them right on. And I forget the exact thing, but it was influencing insects, which insects were coming in. And then it was also helping to fertilize the soil around the edges of the field. Do you remember what the thing with the insects? It was a kind of a complex thing he'd figured out, but it was working for him. And then the main thing is getting to know the context of the land itself. So to know the land that you're working with, there is no set protocol for building healthy land. Your land is different from everyone else's. You and only you are going to be the one who's going to figure out what's going to work best on your land, and that's where the monitoring comes back. Monitoring is not just having Peter or I come in and do carbon sampling. It's getting out there with a shovel and looking at what's going on underneath the surface of the land, and seeing what the soil structure looks like. And you'd be amazed at how many farmers never actually go out onto their land with a shovel. Simplest monitoring you can do. So, okay, I'll stop there.
Well, I was going to ask Bill Mumma, who's here from Tufts University and Williams before that, and he gave this wonderful talk that I saw, and I know you're giving talks all over the place.
This is a surprise presentation, but I've had an extraordinary week. On Monday, I was in New York.
You'd be surprised, but we still want you to talk to the mic.
All right, sorry.
Okay.
Good. Get it there. All right. On Monday, I was in New York City for Climate Week, which is independent of all the stuff that goes on at the United Nations, where there's a lot of talk about climate and what we're going to do, and the Pope made his incredible speech there, as he made his incredible speech to the Congress, and got everybody all worked up about climate, which was really good. And even India has now said they're going to do something, which is exciting. I don't think it was because of the Pope. They did it. They announced it on Mahatma Gandhi's birthday. So we all have our icons, and we need to live by them. That's fine. But there's a group out of MIT called Climate Interactive, and they can do these kind of instantaneous calculations on what are the consequences of the promises that governments are making. And the answer is we're about a quarter of the way there with what the governments are going to agree to in Paris. That's, you know, we talk about wanting to not go above 2 degrees Celsius, 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, we're probably headed to maybe 6 or 7 degrees Fahrenheit, which is better than 8 or 10, which is what we'd be otherwise. On the other hand, it's a start. But what was really exciting to me was not what the governments were saying, but what the states and provinces and cities and private corporations were saying during Climate Week, which is the rest of the world besides governments. And I'm on the board of an organization called the Climate Group, which works with those particular constituencies. And they have something called the RE100. They want to get 100 major corporations, multinational corporations, to commit to 100% renewable energy. Well, they were able to announce that 36 major companies are doing this. They made this commitment, and some have already achieved it. So next time you get your Starbucks, sometime over the next few years, it will be all made with renewable energy. Apple has announced that not only are they going to be 100% solar, and they're building, they spent $850 million to build a big solar array in California, but they're going to have their entire supply chain. So that means Foxconn in China that's making your iPhone is going to have to be run by solar energy. So you start adding up all those are not in the government estimates at all. What we've talked about here about soils is not in the estimates at all. In fact, I don't know whether it's good news or bad news that there is nothing about soils in the Paris Accord. Absolutely nothing. There are no incentives, there's no crediting system, there's nothing. There's one piece that deals with forest in developing countries, and it's called the reduction of emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. And it's a good thing. They finally got ironed out, you know, how you treat indigenous people who are living in forests and all that kind of thing. That's sort of pretty well been dealt with. So the social dimension seems pretty good. The environmental carbon cycle piece is good, but there is zero on soils. Now, if you look at what we really have to do, absolutely we must stop putting more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere from all sources, from energy, from industry, from deforestation, and from soils. And as Dee Dee pointed out, something about 1/3 of all the carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere today is from soil degradation over time. It's an astounding fact that's totally ignored in the discussions. You have to talk to the carbon cycle people to get these kind of numbers and so on. And then you need to look at the people who are actually thinking about soils as something other than just a place that you stick roots in the ground and get plants out of. And as Peter, as you said, and assume that the carbonaceous material in living things comes from the soil rather than from the air. So the piece that got me going, and actually it is in the last Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, but it got no attention whatsoever, was the finding that if we were to say we're at 400 parts per million carbon dioxide right now, that's 0.04% of the atmosphere's carbon dioxide. If we were able to stop this at 450 parts per million, we would have a temperature rise of roughly 2 degrees Celsius. But that temperature would remain for 1,000 years or more. The carbon dioxide will not go away immediately, and the transfer of heat to the oceans will take time. So the only thing we can do is to actively remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. If we do that, we can shorten that time. At the same time, we're putting this huge amount in the oceans and making it acidic. So we've been very fortunate. The oceans have taken up take up every year about 1/4 of what, an amount equal to about 1/4 of what we put in. The forests and soils take up about 1/4. And so what grows in the atmosphere is only about half as much as we actually put in a given year. So you have this huge reservoir. We add 10 billion tons of carbon a year, and about 5 are still in the atmosphere. 5 go into forests and soils. 5 goes more or less, or excuse me, 2.5 goes into forests and soils, and the other goes into the ocean. So if we could figure out a way to remove it actively, so the mineral removal is one possibility. There are some people at MIT working on mechanical things, which I frankly think is a lot more work than just having trees and soils and things that have been doing it for millions of years. It's a time-tested technology, and it seems to have proven its worth over the millennia, over the megalinnia, or whatever a million years is. And so we must actively start removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, or else we're talking about condemning 40 to 80 generations of human beings to a world that is a whole lot warmer and drier and less functional than the one that we're in right now. So the soils idea, you know, has been around for a very long time, and yet it has never gained currency. And the first time I kind of made the connection was when I read Poland's Omnivore Dilemma, when he described Polyphase Farm. It was the first time I had ever really thought about it as, oh yes, here's somebody who claims he's a grass farmer. He gets 4 times as many cows per acre as his neighbors do. His grass is greener. Everything is healthier. He has chickens. He does all these kinds of things in some kind of ecological structure, rather than just machines grinding up the earth and pouring seeds and chemicals and water on it. And that was my revelation. And then Seth Iskon had been bugging me for about 2 years about this guy, Alan Savory, some guy in Zimbabwe who is grazing cattle in a way that restores the soils. And I said, yes, Seth, that's very interesting, but I don't have time right now. And so finally, as I began to get more desperate myself, I said, Seth, tell me that story again. And so we invited Alan to come and speak at Tufts University. We filled this huge auditorium with people, not only students, but a lot of people from the community that was already thinking about this and working on it. And then 1.5 years later, we had him come back. Well, in fact, that became the basis for his TED Talk, that presentation at Tufts. That was and I mean, he had to shorten it because it was 1 hour plus long there. And then we had him come back for a 2-day workshop with we had 30 selected graduate students from School of Nutrition and Foreign Relations and ecology and policy. Anyway, a really interesting mix of people. And we talked about the holistic management approach, which he has applied to grazing lands. And how would those principles be applied to other situations? So how would you apply it to the management of forest? How would you apply it to the management of fisheries? I mean, lots of similarities. Alan's big insight was, if a place has been overgrazed and your solution is to take animals off it, the grass never comes back, right? Because grasslands, it suddenly dawned on him, grasslands evolved with grazers. Grazers evolved with grasslands. Maybe there's a connection here. And so after in his own admission, being responsible for killing 3,500 elephants or something for trampling the grass in South Africa, he finally decided that wasn't working. And so if you think about the cod being gone offshore, where are we saying, well, we'll stop fishing cod, and that's going to solve it? It hasn't solved it. We have so disrupted the system that even by not overcatching, we can't bring it back. Just as by stopping grazing, you can't bring back the grass. You have to find some way to restore the ecological processes that were there that made the grass grow or the codfish come. And it was a fascinating 2 days of working groups and reports back and so forth. So I guess I would just close by saying, it may not be a bad thing that this is not in the Paris Accords, because if it were, governments would say, well, let's count this, and let's not put in more renewable energy, or let's not stop using coal. I mean, I'm speculating here, but I could imagine the negotiators saying, oh yeah, we got a bunch of crazy people up in Vermont who are restoring carbon in the soil, so we don't have to reduce our coal-fired power plants nearly as much as we thought we did, right? I mean, that's kind of how it might go. So, in a way, having this being subversive and underground and so forth, where it belongs underground, right? I mean, this is about underground stuff. That maybe having it underground is better than having it above ground and mainstream and visible at this stage. I mean, ultimately, I think we're going to have to really do it on a massively coordinated basis. But for now, let's just surprise them.
So this is Peter Kellerman. He's my cousin, and he's the chair of the geology department at Columbia University, and he's working on sequestration through rocks.
This is really impromptu, but I see that because it's being filmed, I have to talk to 20 people with a microphone. I apologize for that. But as I listen here and I'm learning about soil carbonation, we're working on actually a carbon dioxide due to weathering, in essence, and uptake due to weathering, and how we might accelerate that process. But it's not cropland where we're focused. Actually, the rocks are very toxic to most plants, but it's a reasonably fast uptake from the atmosphere, so that in the Sultanate of Oman, about 100,000 tons a year are taken up by this natural process. And then you ask yourself, what could we do to nudge it in the direction of 1 billion tons? So that's kind of what we're doing in our research. But I also teach an Earth Resources class, and I think probably the overview of carbon management that I provide in the class is probably likely to be more important than our specific research. So I'm here to learn about soil carbon because I want to teach people about it. But so just a couple thoughts. The appetite for fossil fuels globally is increasing by between 2.5% and 3% a year, and it has been doing so for more than 100 years, and currently shows no sign of abating. So, except maybe this year, actually. But we have a really big problem on our hands, and it's only getting worse. So 3% a year, the doubling time for that is just a little bit more than 20 years. So unless something really, really significant changes, emissions, which are now about 40 billion tons of CO2 or about 10 billion tons of carbon, are going to double 20 years from now. So in that context, I would really urge everyone in this community not to look for one silver bullet, not to be critical of other people's ideas, and to accept that we're going to have to implement a whole bunch of partial solutions in parallel. So there's not going to be one thing that just totally solves the problem. And so we need for people to speed up the energy transition. We need for people to think about carbon capture at point sources like smokestacks. We need people to think about air capture because we'll almost surely overshoot safe limits of CO2 in the atmosphere, and so we need to, at the very least, be doing research on those techniques. And so one of those is mineral carbonation, one of those is soil carbonation. I certainly wouldn't. I would never want to ask people to choose between those methods. They're barely sufficient together. So just in thinking about the next step, there's this moral hazard issue for air capture and carbon dioxide removal from air, broadly speaking. There's actually a really nice National Research Council report on carbon dioxide removal from air that came out in February. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And they certainly consider soil carbon as a very important sink for carbon dioxide from air. They think that you folks might be able to globally do about 3 billion tons a year for maybe something like 100 years. So that's good. And so it's not like the entire community of policymakers is ignoring this. But on the other hand, yeah, we do have to be careful, as Bill said, not to give the fossil fuel industry a get out of jail free card, because they'll grab it. I mean, one of my colleagues at Columbia, heard what I was working on recently and said, oh, that's great, that'll totally change the equation, right? We don't have to worry about fossil fuel emissions anymore. I was like, no. So there's a lot of different threads to this story, and I'm optimistic for my children that together with a bunch of different approaches we're going to solve this problem, but it's certainly not something that one specific technology is going to do by itself. And I mean, another piece of good news is that the cost of photovoltaic electricity generation has fallen by more than a factor of 10 in the last 10 years. And when that really truly becomes profitable compared to fossil fuel generation, it will take off. It will grow at 30% a year as soon as it reaches parity. So there's lots of good stuff going on, but we certainly don't want to be getting out our elbows and saying this is better than that. That's not a good way to go. Thanks.
So thank you, everybody. I just wanted to kind of finish the loop. The big piece that has been missing with farming and getting farmers on the land has really been capital. And so with our Iroquois Valley Farms, I feel like we're working in the right direction, because we can get those farmers on the land without them having to buy it. We can help with succession planning, like we're working with Sandy to help him find the right farmer, and then we can buy his farm and support that farmer who will work on Sandy's as Sandy retires. So that's a really, really big piece. And as people are beginning to divest from investments in extractive and oil stocks, let's switch soil for oil and invest in the land. So thank you all for coming. It's been really interesting.